Good evening, everyone, and good evening to all our viewers, both who are watching this live and after the fact. Welcome to our Saturday session at the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, and please join us as we open up and do a small reading from the book Happy Life, just to get our minds and our hearts centered on this moment together. So we're reading from chapter 5 of the first edition of Happy Life. Grant your fellow man the same rights and favors that you expect from him. Selfishness is an illness that poisons the soul. The friend at your side yearns for the same spaces to live in as you do. Remember not to deny him the opportunity. Learn to share what is yours. Great reminder from Joanna today to share with one another and to also share our love, goodness, and equality for all. So, dear friends, join me in closing your eyes, lifting up our hearts and our minds to our divine Creator, our Father, Mother God. And in gratitude for this moment, we thank you. And we connect with our spirit mentors, benefactors of this moment. And we ask that our speaker this evening, Leo, be able to be guided, to be a vessel of love and light, and to share the most profound messages from Spiritism. And may all those who are ready to hear and are listening, may these teachings land on their hearts and on their souls, opening them up and bringing them solace. With Jesus in our hearts and in our minds, we ask to begin this meeting tonight, and so be it. Well, dear friends, without further ado, we don't want to take up much more of his time because we're super eager to hear more about this book. And beginning today, we have Leonardo Vieira with us. Leo, we're so excited to hear about this book, the introduction, chapters 1 and 2. So go ahead, take it away.
Thank you so much, Kirsten, and for this beautiful prayer and connecting us to this moment, right? Give me 1 second here. The camera is a little bit close there, but I guess it's okay. We'll work with that. That's fine. Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to this moment that we are going to be sharing this amazing book with you on the way to a world of regeneration. Today, we'll be covering the beginning of the introduction, the first chapter, and the second chapter. I would like to please bear with me as I actually go through this talk. We had a last minute situation where I had to get my eyes dilated. So if I'm reading slowly. Just bear with me. Everything's okay. Everything's fine. But it's just that we had to do this the last minute. And here we are together to kick off this study and presentation of this amazing book. It is also a good thing to remind ourselves that this is a continuation of a series of talks that we have been doing on two previous books that comes right before this one, Planetary Transition and On the Dawn of a New Era as well, that we're going to see. Before I go on and even mention, the give some highlights on Divaldo Franco, Manuel P. Miranda, as we usually do when we start the studies of these books. I want to ask you a question, and for those of you who read both books as well, Planetary Transition, on a new era as well, on the dawn of a new era, and hopefully this book as well. I would like to ask you a question before we start. What's important to you? What stood out on the study of these two previous books? Is it the same thing for you? What strikes you the most? Do you see a pattern? In general, I would love to hear from you, and if you can put on the comments as well, or if you're watching us through YouTube, wherever channel you're watching us through, please put the comments so we can connect with one another. There are a lot of similarities. There are some different aspects as well, different approach to the issues that are being addressed. But most importantly, one thing that we know for sure, we see suffering, right? And we're not here directly to talk about suffering to end or Saturday super sad. No, that's not the goal. The goal is for us to learn from it and to move on with new ideas, new um, um, let's say perspective in life, so that our Sunday, talking about the next day of our lives, it's more enlightening, right? Our perspective changes. We take the old lenses and we see things a little bit more clear, and a little bit more positive as well. But that is just something that came to mind and to our hearts in order for us to kickstart this book. Because if we just continue just to read, the lines and not really, really diving between the lines to find out what Manuel de Miranda is doing or trying to say, really, we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to improve ourselves at all. So let us take a look a little bit on these two amazing hearts, minds. Manuel de Miranda. Before we even go to the books, he was born in November 14th, 1876, and passed July 14th, 1942. He was born in Bahia, in Brazil. Sorry about the D's there. It was probably me try to fix these things before this, not seeing too much here, but things are getting better now. Um, he was a dedicated man, to say the least, towards the works of mediumship as well. And he worked in Spiritism in his last reincarnation, as well as he continued to work in Spiritism on the other side as well, bringing amazing books, sharing his knowledge on the other side, and continue to help others, being part of teams as we saw in Planetary Transition, as well as the dawn of a new era, as we have shared here with you. Divaldo Franco, also born in the state of Bahia in Brazil, born on May 5th, 1927, and he is still working diligently in Spiritism through presentations all over the world. Recently went through some difficult issues, physical issues, but he still, I'm saying this because he still continued to work, even though the health is not 100% because of age. Obviously, all of us go through that. I will go through hopefully the same way that he's going through. Being very positive and working as he is working. He founded in 1947 the Path of Redemption Spiritist Center in 1952, Mission of the Way, a Spiritist speaker spreading hope in Brazil and 60 other countries in all 5 continents. Divaldo is also the founder of the Peace and You movement that you can also check that online, all over the world. Divaldo psychographed over 200 works with over 7 million copies sold and 104 titles translated into 16 languages as well. And this is one of the works that we are sharing with you that has been translated as well. Thank God. And thank to the effort of many people here in the US to bring this work to you, right? And it's in English. Now, a little bit about the two books that we have mentioned before, Planetary Transition and Dawn of a New Era. We worked on Planetary Transition on 2020, exactly when this book was being psychographed, the one that we're going to be talking about today, on the way to a world of regeneration. And as you can see, there are a number of amazing chapters here that is worth diving into and learning from it. The dawn of a new era. It is certainly a continuation of the book. There are cases. We really have to go back to planetary transition and kind of find the um, the foundation of the problem that is being addressed in the dawn of the new era, but it was actually in the foundation was in the planetary transition. So again, also a lot of teachings to all of us And many of these chapters are so enlightening that it's worth not just a read, but also a study. When I say study, it's not necessarily that you're going to stop and you're going to do something severe in terms of, really, study a chapter or, 1 month. We can do that. And I think it's worth it. Perhaps if you can do that at your Spiritist center or at your home with, your loved ones. But if anything, what I would recommend is to take these books and with a notepad and your computer next to it as well, because it's important for you to take notes of the things that is coming to mind, and also you do um, your analysis by going to the web as well. And for example, looking into historical facts, looking to some of the aspects that are mentioned by Manuel Filomeno and Miranda to connect with today. Because, one of the things that we can bring from these books is the analysis of the past, of what we have done, and the consequences of where we are right now, right? Our present, and how do we change what we have done in the past with the knowledge that we have now in the present to construct our future, right? Anything that we're doing, much like what everything that we're doing now, will create a consequence, much like the things that we have done in the past brought us together in this consequence that we are right now. And gladly, we're here together watching this, sharing this moment with one another. And don't just watch. I need to correct myself there. Make sure that you also engage with your thoughts, with your feelings, send all of us good vibrations, in allowing ourselves to connect with this, as the message also permeates our environment, of our homes, and of our hearts as well. So once more, thank you for being here and connecting with us on this. So, on the Way to a World of Regeneration. My goodness, an amazing book. And I go back to the questions that I said at the beginning. Is it the same book? Is it the same thing? Does it follow a same pattern? Yeah, in some aspects it does, right? And it may be, to some of us, repetitive. Repetitive in the sense that the Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, or let's call it just him, Mr. Miranda, is bringing us some cases that are worth to for us to study, to understand. Um, and it is in this repetitive that I want you to also highlight to yourself that if we don't engage on this repetitiveness, we will not be able to assimilate to a high degree of what we need to learn, on how we need to change. So it is worth for us to say it again. If you think that, okay, maybe it's the same case or whatnot, it is, but this is how we're going to change. And I will go deeper into that and later on in a couple minutes, in the first slides that we're going to share here. But the book, as it is presented, that we are at the beginning of a major changes, and correlated phenomena will demonstrate that the times announced by the scriptures and confirmed by the immortal spirits have arrived. Tragedies of all kinds are shaking the physical world, currently plagued by the COVID-19 pandemic, showing the fragility of the human being on the pedestal of its illusions. Excuse me. The devastating and fatal virus demonstrate the need more than ever for love and solidarity to survive the chaos. More cruel than a war, the pandemic will reap hundreds of thousands of lives, some by the natural processes of more transformation of the earth towards a world of regeneration, while others will be exiled to another orb after a period of convalescence in community excuse me, in this spirit world. In this book, narrated by the spirit Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, the reader will follow the journey and task undertaken by dozens of groups of spirit benefactors under the command of spirit guide Ismael, which is we'll see later on, the guide of Brazil, the spiritual guide of Brazil, as they prepare the new age on earth, following its transition from a world of trials and expiations to a new world of regeneration. I would like to stop here. For those of you, and you can go back to different chapters, and there are actually talks about this as well. That planet Earth being a planet of trials and expiation, right? We move from a primitive world, as we learn from Spiritism, to a trial of expiation, then a world of regeneration, and then, I believe, if I'm not mistaken here, a happy world, and then a celestial planet, right? Folks, when we study this, the first thing that comes to mind for us who are looking for happiness is that um, we are already there, right? We are already at this idea. We're already in this phase of regeneration. That we are good spirits. That we are perfect. No, we're not. We're far from it. And I know for some of you, I'm bursting your bubble, but it's something that I would like to address here, because this also may hinder your ideals onto of reading this book, right? Of really understanding what is being said, and may deter you to think that, okay, this is a repetitive message. I don't need this anymore. We already seen in this book, on the other previous two, on the previous two books, right? But this transition happens very slowly. It's not something that happens, overnight. Um, the cases, or the case of this COVID-19 pandemic shows us, yes, that in fact we need a lot of, we need to change quite a bit, and we have learned quite a bit, but we still have to change quite a bit, and still, in the idea of, of a changed, or a more mature planet, right? And this is in every sense of the word, because perhaps we may have, as we will see here, some advancements in technology. We also have to, learn how to deal with this technology, right? So the moral is not there. The morality to deal with technology nowadays is still very childish, kind of, morality, right? We're so advanced in terms of creating a new, how can we say this, a new software, right? That will make wonders in our lives. However, we don't know the issues that may come with, having such of advancement in our hands as well. So there are a lot that we need to learn, right? So number one, we have made some progress. We are not in the primitive state of the caveman, of doing, killing, to protect ourselves, right? Not necessarily in the sense of war that we're killing to take somebody's life. We do other very nefarious things, if we can say that way, but we're not in the same stage, and we have progressed quite a bit, right? No wonder we are in this still in this in living on an earth that is have major characteristics of trials and expiation like planet, and we are seeing very small signs of a planet of regeneration, hopefully starting with each one of us, when we are more compassionate to ourselves, when we're compassionate to others, when we're more persistent on the good, because we are tired of seeing the same old things that really hurts us and hurts others as well. I just want to bring this so we can kind of like set our minds and our hearts as we see some of these cases, as we discuss some of the alerting messages from Mr. Miranda, as well, some of the mentors and some of the helpers that we're going to see here today. All right. So, what are we going to see? What are we seeing with this book? What are the chapters? As you can see, it's the same thing with the other two books. Amazing chapters that talks about the alarm bugles, the alarms that are actually being shown in the spiritual world. The tests are being established, adjusting new loggings, activities overview when they're going to explain what's going to be done, timely clarifications, explanation of events. These are all the things that are being done from there to here, and in with the help of some of those who are already incarnated here on earth as well. Love never stops. The city of justice, further arrangements, so on and so forth, illumination of conscience. So these are the things that are going to be delivered to us with these chapters by Mr. Miranda, as well as the collective work of many other spirits, incarnated and discarnated as well, that we should not take for granted, the same way we saw in the other two books. So let us dive into it. Today, as we said earlier, we're going to be sharing with you the introduction, the chapter one and chapter two. As you can see, well, you cannot see it yet. The introduction is just that, an introduction and kind of some highlights of what's going on planet Earth by Manuel P. Miranda. The first chapter is actually some introductions of what's happening on planet Earth. Um, by a guide or a high spirit from where Manuel Filomeno de Miranda is currently living in the spirit world, and establishing tasks as well, which will be kind of give us some clarification on what is being done. And I urge you that this is right in the middle of the pandemic, right? This is right in the middle of I would say 2020, when these events were taking place. So now it's funny because I'll just go back here real quick. When we go back to this screen to this um, the part over here, we see that the first book was in 2010 that highlighted the tsunami in the Indian Ocean, and then it was actually translated to English in 2016, right? Many years after. The same thing with the Dawn of New Era, where it was actually published in 2012, and it was translated into English in 2018. Guess what? This book was actually published in 2020. It was translated into English in 2021. So it was much faster, and it's much, how am I going to say, much more alive to us because we're still living the consequences of the pandemic, and we have not come out of it yet. It's not over. We still see, at the beginning of this year, there were many cases because of the new strain and many things that is happening as well. If we go into a political arena, which we'll touch a little bit, it's still a mess. Sorry to say that way, as well as the economical arena, right? We're still recuperating. Many countries are still in very difficult positions because of this situation, because of the pandemic. Here we have introduction, the alarm bugles, and establishing tasks. That's what we're going to cover today. Manuel Filomeno de Miranda starts with a beautiful part of the Spirit book that can be found in the third part of the Spirit book, the Law of Progress, chapter 8, right? This part is entitled Civilization. And for those who who may have read the book or may even say, Leo, it's a sequel, right? Or it's a continuation of the other book. Here it is. Let me go ahead and bring this as a highlight, as an answer to all of us. Question 791. Will of the Spirit's book. Will civilization be purified one day so that the evil it has produced will disappear? And the answer is yes, when morality is as developed as the intelligence, the fruit cannot come before the flower. This question, folks, is not supposed to be presented not only to others. When we read these questions, when we study Spiritism, it's not for us to pose to other individuals. It's to pose to ourselves first. It's for us to internalize and say, will I be purified one day so that the evil we have produced disappear? Right? Let us apply to ourselves first. And then the answer comes saying, look, when my morality is as developed as my intelligence, right, the fruit, then things will change because the fruit cannot come before the flower. To give a continuation, so we can make a final comment on this. Why doesn't, and then the next question, why doesn't civilization nearly realize all the good it could produce? Because we are not yet ready or disposed to obtain that good. We may have a glimpse, we may have an idea what that is, but not necessarily we are in a position to understand. Much like dealing with our children, right? Whether they're very small, whether they're teenagers or young adults, they still don't understand. They still cannot see the consequences of their own acts or what what we desire them to accomplish, right? They cannot foresee that. They don't have the visionary mind to go and understand. They may have some glimpse, maybe because they saw on TV, maybe because they have seen the example from other people, but we have to experience. And that is the issue that I would like to bring here, that we have not experienced enough for us to grasp it. And I think the study of this book, it is for sure a a recapitulation not only of some cases but also the emphasis that we have to put on goodness, on hard work, on preserving ourselves, right, and not allowing ourselves to fall into issues of the past. To finalize this part over here, there is a follow-up of this question 792 when Kardec asks, wouldn't it also be because in creating new needs, it excites new passions? And the Spirit says, by the way, Mr. Miranda did not put this continuation here, but I thought it was prudent for us to go ahead and share this part as well. Yes, and because all a spirit's faculties do not evolve in tandem. Everything takes time. You cannot expect perfect fruit from an imperfect civilization. Once more, folks, how can we expect from ourselves to be perfect? I'm talking about now applying this to Leo, right? How can I expect myself to be perfect? Um, since I haven't experienced everything, since I have gone through certain struggles, certain experiences in life, in order for me to say, well, I know this, or at least I understand. I haven't grasped it yet, but I understand because I went through this or that situation, right? Much like me saying to, a female or a lady who had a kid, oh, I understand the pain of birth. No, I don't. I can make a correlation, kind of have a relative idea of some other pains or pain level and whatnot. No, but it doesn't really. I can never say such a thing. So I'm using this raw example so that we understand the imperfectiveness of others as well, right? So if I'm not perfect, for sure I shouldn't be expecting others to be perfect as well. I cannot expect the positive outcomes from what we're going through right now. Hopefully, this helps you understand and see the world a little bit better because sometimes I have my struggles too, especially by studying these books, especially by reading this. And it's like, why are we still missing the boat, right? But, anyways, let's go into the introduction. What does Mr. Miranda says in this introduction? He starts by contemplating again the as usual in many cases he actually starts a lot of these chapters by saying what's going on in the environment, right? So he says earth civilization has reached a high level of expertise regarding cutting edge technology, the advancement of knowledge, the great challenges of intelligence, the implementation of widespread programs of solidarity, as well as sense of respect and compliant with the laws that foster external progress and its consequent amenities. So we're not that bad yet. We're not that bad anymore. We're not seeing, we're not in completely struggle, as we have said, as a planet um, uh, of a primitive planet. Excuse me. Moving from dark cave to the luxurious residence, from filth to elaborate forms of hygiene, coupled with the immense quest for the prolongation of a pleasurable and self-indulgent physical existence, society has nonetheless been struggling to defeat illnesses, loneliness, and widespread suffering. I'm going to continue reading because this is really interesting. The toil to enjoy worldly comforts often leads to tormenting egotistical abuses of power, indifference to existence, suffering, and disrespect for the duties imposed by life to all human beings. Terrifying ghosts lurk everywhere. Children maturing has. Well, I'm going to stop here because I thought I had actually brought the information that he was actually explaining to us what was happening as he was in from the spiritual colonies, looking at the planet and seeing that there was this dark cloud around the planet in giving the appearance that again, it was just dark. It was just very difficult to deal with. And it says that those dark clouds were actually being produced by the psyche of those here on earth, by us, right? And what was happening is the rays of sun would come and dissipate those dark clouds, right? And from time to time, they would see some, the dark clouds getting better, but then right after, it would start all over again. So it's this constant battle, of us creating unfortunate, feelings and ideas, creating these dark clouds, and the high spirits through the rays of the sun, dissipating this dark clouds, and then happen again, back and forth. And if anything, I think this is, these two books continue, the two previous books, and this one here is exactly it. The 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 hard work, the enlightening work of the higher spirit, guiding us and trying to dissipate, the dark matter created by us here on planet Earth. And then he continues to give us an idea of what's going on now on planet Earth by saying terrifying ghosts lurk everywhere. Children maturing hastily without having lived their childhood, or initiated in the vile games of pleasures at a tender age, lacking with rare exceptions the care of attentive parent and vigilant families. They embark on unhealthy and premature habits, becoming easy prey to drugs and sexual abuse. Amid the exaggerated demands of freedom in social life, increasing more libertine, the inevitable question remains as to where society is heading with this massive and frenzied self-indulgent behavior. And then the elderly almost completely abandoned except when they are wealthy, and even then placed in nursing homes and forgotten by family members, are despised or deemed an unpleasant weight on society's economy. The it was even that it was in consideration, excuse the typo there, including as well appointed or not, of eliminating them to prevent them from becoming examples of physical decay and the fatality of old age on the way to the grave, which at the point seemed to be delaying its duty as well. So we see here, and we're going to see a little bit more because he brings this idea to us, that things are not well at all on planet Earth. Even though we're on the way to a world of regeneration, a lot of work needs to be done, right? And if you may agree with me, we can take our conclusions here based on what we're going through. This is not a pessimistic view of it, but and I know that social media and all the different ways that we receive information nowadays, it seems like that we are seeing more, right? We're seeing a lot of drastic things, um, and it's more apparent to all of us. There are two things here. Yes, in fact, the social media technology has brought us much, together, but also things are being delivered much faster. So, in the past, we would not see what's going on, the suffering that is going on, perhaps on the other side of the world, perhaps in Japan, in other countries, especially if those countries or to be considered a small or perhaps a third world, as we used to say, country where really to majority of the rest of the planet doesn't really matter. Right now things are happening, people have access to social media, people have access to the web, and they can post things, so we're seeing a lot. The second thing I would say as well is that many of us, especially for those of us who are doing these type of studies, who are more spiritualized, we're paying more attention, and that is one of the greatest signs ever. It's funny that when we start studying spiritism, we become a little bit more spiritualized. We tend to see more negative things. It's not that we're pessimistic, but now we're aware. Now we're becoming like, you know what? This is wrong. This is not the right way to go in terms of us as a society. And the beautiful thing that happens after that is that when we bring ourselves to a responsible state, where we say, okay, so how can I make it better? How can I help to change at least the environment where I'm in, my workplace, at home, change with, an individual that we perhaps don't haven't been working well with it, right? Or children, or elderly, right? The different things. Or even if we tell ourselves, let me take it easy, perhaps life is not just about consuming, right? So I think this responsibility that arises, that is born from this enlightenment, right? Or this awakening, is certainly very helpful to all of us. And then he continues by saying, undoubtedly, these present days are turbulent, with the essential meaning widely disappearing, bounded by continuous pessimism and violence that aim uh, the tough action, I believe, excuse me, towards the destruction of the integral and wholesome being. Fortunately, Jesus' teachings, although confronting cultural and behavior cynicism, survive with their flame of love and forgiveness, fraternity, and kindness, sustaining millions of lives that bond with them, working for order and duty to solidarity. These crazy days shall pass. They are part of a period of assessment and selection of ideas and existence, which return to the earth bearing unspeakable conflicts until pain chisels them with beautiful results. So, folks, it will change. After being subjected to the scalpel of denial, the Spiritist phenomena overcame traditional and historical incredulity, giving rise to the optimistic philosophy of reincarnation, unblemished joys, and the development of high meaning aspiration. So things will change. This is not this is not to show that we are doomed, or that perhaps we're not going anywhere. There are consequences, unfortunately, to the moments, to the creations that we're putting out there. Excuse me for one second. I'll be right back. I hope this is better. um, there are consequences to the our reality right now, right? What we're constructing, right? And I think that we're gonna go through by seeing the unfortunate consequences, the way we're presenting ourselves towards life right now in general. Later on, will come back to us and say, maybe we should, rethink about this, right? Maybe we should do it differently, because now, by reaping the consequences of our acts now, we'll be able to see it better. I know it's not, the best way to explain, or perhaps even justify what's happening, but unfortunately, as we have said before, and we have brought the Mr. Miranda brought the questions from the Spirit's book, we ought to apply to ourselves first. So if we're not there yet, how can others be that way? How can the totality be in a position or in the same page as well? It's not there. It's not going to happen. But as Mr. Miranda is saying, things will change. This is not to discourage us, but quite the opposite, to really bring us enlightenment so that we can live a more fulfilling life. Let's move on, because we still have a lot to cover, and make sure that we are on par with what we would like to deliver today in terms of chapter 1 and 2. This shall pass, folks. In the way it will pass is by us enlightening ourselves, and it reminding ourselves of where we are and where we can be as well, right? Because there are a lot of good things happening around us too. The Alarm Bugles, the first chapter. Here we're going to bring some information from Manuel Filomena de Miranda, as well as the mentor that speaks to a group of individuals in the spirit realm, to the colony where Manuel Filomena de Miranda was located. From our community in the spirit world, we watch the terrestrial planet being slowly enveloped by a massive mantle of darkness. This is actually, forgive me, I made a mistake. He addresses the situation of the planet here on chapter 1. I'm going to read it anyway so you can get the right words here. We also knew that the denseness of those somber spiritual fluids came from the noxious mental emanations of its inhabitants. All around, At a regular distance, we could see the sidereal spaces in the Solar King with the strength of its light trying to disperse the thick layer resembling the dark clouds that preceded heavy gulls. On that special September night, after hearing the sound of the alarm bugles echoing everywhere, we gathered at a immense open air amphitheater from where we could see the whirlwind of the stars dancing in their own light and the unimaginable symphony they created in a magical celestial pageantry. A total of 10 entities, including those responsible for the activity and disguised guests, took their seats around a large table placed on one side of the stage on a slight elevation accentuated with majestic floral arrangements. And this is when we meet Antulio, the administrator of our community of the community where he was, that start explaining what's happening on the earth right now. And I would like to warn you, it's pretty alarming, and there are some really one can say difficult explanation, as we have seen as well on the previous two books, right? So another again connection with the other two books, and I'm going to be doing this back and forth because it emphasizes again how much we need to revisit these issues with the mind to help and guide and receive help and guidance as well. Okay, so one thing that is interesting here that he's some key notes that I would like to bring. This is actually back in September of 2020, right? If we go back to the beginning of the book, the message by Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, the introduction of the book, was actually given to us on November 27, 2020. So the introduction was actually something that happened afterwards that perhaps he had already brought the whole study and the whole work through Divaldo Franco. But here he's reporting to this September night. So this is probably September of 2020. And then going back to Antulio, very wise man to say the things that he said. And I can only imagine being in such a meeting where we're kind of going through these explanations for us to prepare ourselves to the work that is to come, right? Because they don't go over well, at least these spirits, they don't go over these sufferings, these difficult moments for no reason, just to say it, right? But they do it as in condition to prepare themselves to what can be done, and what changes can be proposed and performed. So he says the following: This morning, although already expected, we with heavy hearts we all heard the melancholic sound of the Bugles, informing us that the beloved planet is now facing the most difficult spiritual crisis of the last centuries. It starts with infinite sufferings, signaling the decline of culture and civilization, those successive devastating regional wars and outrageous means of entertainment, as extravagant as they were crude as well. I'm going to kind of read and I'm going to make some points, but most of the time I'm going to be reading a lot of it so we can actually make our comments as we go along. For decades now, drug addiction has been consuming younger generations while degrading vices proliferate in society, undermining family, education, health, and human dignity. The pestilent miasmas of materialism engulfing the masses mock God as an absolute myth, and the figure of Jesus and his teaching, as well as those who followed him in his days, as objects of scorn and disdain. In the name of art and culture, dissipation raged everywhere with the consent of the authorities or even encouraged by them, with serious behavior disorders shaping a venal and disturbed society. Ethical values, at first quietly and then through virtual as well as traditional channels, were rejected as repressors of freedom, while the need of making space for all sections of society also opened the doors for unchecked debauchery. Culture and apparently sensible people suddenly felt the need to break the boundaries, which they called taboos, and bear themselves in the name of new order, further dehumanizing the human being while humanizing the animals. So we see that there is chaos, but it's not the chaos that is leading us to a new beginning in terms of okay, we need to um, uh, make a mess in the room, right? Taking everything out as if we're fixing the room, we're painting it the new. No, it's not that. It's just chaos for chaos, right? There's no vision of, okay, we're going to go through a tough moment here, but we're doing this because we want to get better, right? Much like, okay, we're going to feel pain through exercise as a consequence of the exercise, so we feel better later, or we construct a new behavior. No, it's not that. It's just that we're doing things deliberately without thinking, and as an adjustment as well to what society is telling us or are imposing on us as well. So it's very alarming, right? Especially when we get to the point where we are seeing the creator, creation, right? When I say creation as well, ourselves as just piece of meat, right? As just the material. We don't see beyond this. Nevertheless, we also need to be careful in terms of the teachings that still stand, as Manuel P and Miranda said, the teachings of our Master Jesus, right? That really is still, fighting these ideals, these pernicious ideals. And then he continues by saying, nonsense of all kinds became the object of everlasting disputes, and any expression of balance was seen as a remnant, remnant of the so-called decadent, excuse me, ultra ultramontane religious behavior. Sorry about that. Political games reached the most shocking, aberrant levels of corruption and thievery, coupled with the prevailing cynicism of dishonorable individuals known for their crimes. Universities negated the purpose for which they were built by earlier civilizations, infiltrated by perverse revolutionaries, placed there by evil politicians to pervert the youth, seducing them with atheist and depraved programs, in which the primitive instincts were exalted until all energies were devoured by the interest of the corrupt and their agents. It was felt in the air, everywhere, that something was about to happen, since moral and intellectual rot had reached an unsustainable level. I want to make a couple highlights on this right here. I know it's a lot of information, and I urge you once more to read the book and to really study this because we see all of these different things happening, right? We connect with this message. We complain about what's happening. We are sad. We are very tired, and I can go on and on and on and on. But something recently happened to me where I was talking to a friend, and she, inadvertently, just kind of like, she just started talking about these things and the problems that, she encountered as well in life, in the religion that she is involved with. The things that, she noticed that it was happening in terms of, people trying to show off, people trying to, pass the word of Christ and the teachings of life in general. I don't want to go too much in details, but again, this amazement of towards what's happening. It's like and she said that she was tired, I can't take it anymore. And then we start talking about different ways for us to connect with God. Not necessarily that we have to follow A, B, or C, and that perhaps that everybody have their limitations, right? But again, I mean, she really showed to me the necessity um, of a change in general. And I was in a way amazed because it is as it was just like a consequence that we mentioned earlier today, like an alert, right? Or awakening saying enough is enough, I'm tired of this, right? And this is really nice. And we did talk about the responsibility that we have on this, on the changes that we can make, right? And then the conversation went on, and this was actually right before I was actually that I had to travel abroad. And obviously this was still in the on the time during the time this is it, happened recently during the time that the we needed the PCR test to travel out of the country, right? Which the PCR, for those of you who traveled, was a mess to get one. It was really difficult to get one. The problem was that you take a PCR test today, it had to be with I think 72 hours or 48 hours before you travel, but nobody was getting a result then. And what happened? A lot of institutions, a lot of people was resorting to fake tests, right? Positive or negative, whatever you needed to get, you can go and get a fake result, not a test, but a fake result of a fake test. And this poor person, as we were talking about, traveling as well, she comes to me and say, Leo, by the way, if you need a fake test, let me know. I know somebody. And then I was like, wait a minute, didn't we just have a conversation for, complaining about, or at least, exposing ourselves on how difficult things are right now? And then the person offers me such a thing. And I said, well, you know what? I will try to do the right way. I think this it's more prudent. I don't want to get involved with such a thing, and I don't want to get in trouble in case something comes back. I didn't go into the explanation that this is wrong. You shouldn't be doing this because the person is also very dear to me. But in my own words, I said, look, if we're complaining about the planet and we're still doing the things of the planet, guess what? We're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to change. And that was very alarming to me as well, because there's still things that perhaps I'm not anymore, you know um, paying or giving life to these negative things, right? A fake test or fake, to cheat on a test or something. But I still have my difficulties inside of me. So it's so nice to also analyze that. How can I judge others if I'm not perfect yet, right? But there are also a lot that we need to help one another to say that's wrong, right? Because if we're paying for a fake test to travel, we also, in fact, if I had the virus and I'm paying for a fake test, I'm also spreading the virus to other people, towards others. So look at the responsibility, right, of doing such a negative act, to say the least. So when we look here that the mentor is saying all these things and we are pointing fingers, we really need to look at in ourselves first, in our surroundings, and make sure that we're not connecting with the same mind, these minds and these hearts in the same level, right? Quite the opposite. We need to change. But let's move on. It was though that the monster was the monster of war would be a solution to reduce the population of the earth, as had happened before, and thus scientific research labs, under the pretext of penetrating microbial life to better study and safeguard health, also established secret codes to create horrifying viruses, starting from the strain of some illnesses. As a dreadful consequence, epidemics have emerged in this century, some transform into pandemics that continue to devour lives by the thousands. So, folks, for those who can read between the lines, we need to take a different approach towards the ideas that we are seeing right now, or that we're going through right now. This is the mentor brought, and this is information brought by Manuel Filomeno Miranda. This is actually not something that happened out of nothing, right? There is a consequence to our actions here, right? But we're not going to go into details. We're not here to point fingers. We're here to be alert that not everything that is being posed to us or how it's being shown to us, that we need to take it, at face value. We need to read, we need to study, and we need to understand what is being done, or how it's being done, or at least, because we're not in control of everything, or at least to understand the consequences of some of the acts, some of the pernicious acts that are happening out there, right? So he continued by saying the confrontations have been incessant, and the discarnate enemies of the good, disguised as benefactors, to continue to poison the masses with their odious sarcasm and arguments, utilize the questionable yellow press to confuse, achieving the purpose with ease and fierce determination. All the fear that we get from all different channels of news and everything. The plague spreads, recalling the Black Death of medieval times when the church's intolerant and irresponsible, through its highest representative, proposed the Inquisition, and more than a million lives accused as heretics were cruelly taken. Soon after, another pope declared that cats were of a satanic nature, resulting in cats being ruthlessly hunted and killed pitilessly. As a natural consequence, rats multiplied rampantly, and carriers of infect fleas contaminated the earth, especially Europe, destroying millions of lives. So the mentor here gives an example of the past, of our ignorance of the past, to show how sickness, right, physical sickness, have actually multiplied and brought the Black Death of the medieval times. Now, we're talking about in the physical sense. Let's also apply this in the spiritual and the mental sense when we talk about how fear is propagated, how discouragement is propagated, not directly to saying, oh, there's nothing that you can do, but by the alarming, I say alarming for us, for some of us, of the sidetrack ideals that are imposed on us. In a certain way, something similar is happening today in fighting the plague or appearing to fight it. Political passions are ruining countries, while survivors of the COVID-19 virus will be decimated by misery and abandon. No one will escape the determination of suffering. And this is how we see the help, right? If not for direct reasons, then out of solidarity and compassion. I'll say it again. No one will escape the determinism of suffering. If not for direct reasons, then out of solidarity and compassion. The time is approaching when, in the name of Jesus, relief teams from our spirit world colonies will descend to the planet in desolation and redemptive reincarnations for specific assistance during the current and other calamities is still slated to take place. We are, to finalize this chapter, all invited to the service of love and charity to our brothers and sisters in our beloved planet Gaia, as the Earth is called in the Greek tradition. So here we are, people, and he also said some amazing other things that this chapter is rather longer than the other two, the introduction in chapter two. But it's important for us to highlight that he said much more than this. This is not everything, and I ask you to please go and read. But at the end, he also tells us that we're all invited to work, that we're all here to work together in this amazing work that is going to be played out. And that's what the next chapter will be, telling us what is being done, preliminary ideas of what's going to happen in terms of work and what has been happening in the spirit realm to help all of us. And before we go into it, the highlight that I'd like to bring is that we're not alone. Again, I mean, we have said this in the past. Daniel asked me, I'm not so sure if it was Planetary Transition. I think it was Planetary Transition where he asked me, Leo, what's the highlight of this book? If anything, I remember that it was the our connection with one another, how we influence one another, and the influence of the good spirits on us as well. So let us not think that it's just the negative, the difficult things that we're seeing here on Earth, but our mentors, the mentors of planet Earth, they're all working with us. They're working for us as well. So let's move on. Establishing task. I know we're almost running out of time here. We already did, by the way. So we're going to kind of go over this chapter quite fast. But it's, again, an introduction to what is happening in terms of the tasks that that were implemented and are still happening on planet Earth. Our small group, comprised of 50 spirits, that comprised of spirits, was soon divided into subgroups. So they went into this meeting to understand what the mentor had said, and they were divided into subgroups. Gathering in one of the rooms, we were immediately informed of who would be in charge of activities. He introduced himself with simplicity, devoid of any irrelevant embellishing references. friendly appearance to have discarnated around the age of 60, he informed us that his name was Francisco Spinelli. We're going to call him Mr. Spinelli, Neapolitan origin, and that he had been engaged in Spiritism activity in the Brazilian state of Rio Grande do Sul. Rio Grande do Sul is the last state all the way down that has borders with Uruguay and Paraguay. If I'm not mistaken, Argentina maybe, I don't know, but for sure those two others. But it's the very southern part of Brazil. And I brought some information that we were able to bring from the Brazilian Federation, the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, excuse me, that Francisco Spinelli was born in Italy on December 31st, 1893, and discarnated on October 7th, 1955. He moved to Brazil with the age of 18 and stayed in there for the rest of his reincarnation. An affable and humble spirit, he dedicated his life to others in the Spiritist philosophy as well. He was also the president of the Spirit Federation of Rio Grande do Sul as well. So, very committed person to the cause and to help others as well. He actually, at one point, he went through Brazil to help with the different federation, different works of spiritist centers as well. So again, someone who was very committed to the work and to bringing light to other lives. Very kindly, he introduced to each group the leader for their activities on the physical plane, explaining that the purpose was the preparation of a new era known as the regeneration of humankind. So if we have a goal here, if these spirits they have a goal, it's exactly this right here, folks. A new era that is happening as we saw the dawn, right? But also the regeneration of humankind. How do we generate ourselves? How can we connect with these minds? And then he says, Mother Earth, and this is actually Manuel P. de Miranda bringing to us. Mother Earth, with her suffering children, would experience a harsher ordeal as had happened in times past. She would feel in her bosom the clamor of the multitudes stricken by the relentless illness that would invite them to rethink the transcendental issues of the physical existence. The excess of technology providing comfort to a large number of spirit reincarnated on the earth was also responsible for their spiritual decline, naturally, with the exception of individuals engaged in the noble objectives of evolution. Quick highlight here, folks. Look at what he's saying in terms of the excesses, right? So we have, for example, at his bring here, technology. Technology is a tool, our cell phones, our computers, TV, whatever it is, right, that we have, our cars, many aspects of our homes. Um, it can certainly lead us to certain extremes, right, if we're not strong enough. Excuse me. But on the other hand, it's also important for us to highlight that through these tools, we can actually help. We can also actually make our lives better, right? Enhance the life of others as well. So it's not that technology is bad; it's how we apply technology in our lives and towards others as well. After General comment, Spinelli announced that the Divine Mercy had several options to lift the planet to a higher evolutionary level without the need for tears, as had occurred several times before. So, look, Divine Mercy, they lay out different options. It's not like we're doomed to live under despair, discouragement, unhappiness. We have different options here, folks. It's not just like, okay, follow this way and you'll be happy. No, different option. What a beautiful thing, right? That they bring here. Yes, human beings let themselves be consumed by their pursuit of pleasures and gratification without respect for life in its various sacred expressions. And he also talks about the respect for nature, right? For everything that we do, there will be a reaction. All the actions towards nature will have a reaction. If we are, and I commented this, I believe, in a couple sessions past last year, where we talk about the environment, right? Or what's happening to the earth right now, getting warmer and warmer and warmer. But I think it's important for us to think in our level, in our homes. Am I spending water while I'm brushing my teeth? Am I turning off the faucet and saying, I'm not going to waste water, right? The amount of trash that we produce. Am I in my home saying, you know what? I'm gonna minimize the trash. I'm gonna buy less packaging, right? I'm gonna try to minimize as much as possible. Or am I separating my trash, right? So the things that can be recycled gets to be recycled, and trash is trash, right? Small things like that. If we were to pay attention to it, yes, we would be at a much better position right now. But the best thing for us right now, unfortunately, is to look at the to watch the news and say, you see, this is a bad politician or this is a bad person. Look at what they're doing in this other country. Well, let us pay attention to ourselves first. Continue on. The task that had been assigned to us was aimed at decreasing the intensity of the epidemic, now turning into a pandemic as it spreads across the globe due to the ease of contagion resulting from the multiple modes of fast transportation um, covering continental distance. For those of us who does not know, an epidemic is where a disease is contaminating a group of people, a small group of people, perhaps is contained in a city or perhaps a state or even a country. But at the moment that it spreads, right, it becomes what we call a pandemic, right? That's the best way that we can explain there, because sometimes we get caught up in words. But at this point, as we know, it is a pandemic. It was an epidemic when it was is just in starting in the Wuhan area, perhaps in China as well. But because as we can see here, uh, of the fast mode of transportation, how we connect with one another, train, especially airplanes, and you name it, it became a pandemic very fast, as we know it. Spiritual structure to prevent emotional I'm sorry, to actually create emotional imbalance as well. It's the structures that we have nowadays. He also points out about this, that now we're emotionally imbalanced, right? To deal with these difficult situations that we're seeing right now. We're very uneducated to deal with our emotions, especially it, and it's rather harder to deal with our emotions when we are presented or we immersed in this pandemic, in this turmoil that we're seeing right now. To finalize, folks, the spirit world communities that would work in Brazil under the command of Ismael, the spirit guide of Brazil, obey a specific schedule, the same occurring in the different nations of the world, according to their own custom, traditions, ethics, and religious beliefs, if any. So we think that this work is being done in Brazil because this is a literature that is being brought from Brazil, accounts that is brought from Brazil, from a medium who is in Brazil. But as it's saying here, the same is occurring on each nation, and it's according to our needs here. So we may think, okay, is exactly the same? No, number one is different because we think differently. We structure ourselves differently in the U.S., much like other countries. But also, they take in consideration traditions, ethics, and religious beliefs as well. All these aspects are being studied and worked from the spirit realm to bring us comfort, right? So the high order spirits, they are creating these outposts to help with in the arena of healthcare and medical studies, connecting with those minds that were and still are studying for us to bring balance to this chaos that we're still living. These specific subgroups would be located in some of the country's state capitals, chiefly in the south, center, and northeast, under the supervision of Euripides Passanufo, in order of his discarnation on November 2nd, 1918, from the Spanish flu. If you want to get to know a little bit more about the spirit is Euripides Passanufo, you can actually Google. It's also online, but also if I believe if you go to chapter 4 or 3 of the Dawn of a New Era, I also give some highlights on the spirit of Euripides Passanufo as well. One can imagine the coldness of these leaders of power, undeniably aware of the seriousness of the pandemic, but tempering the real dangers with others. dominated by another class of interest, generated panic through terrifying information and other criminal expedients. Here he's actually talking about the leaders that did not act on time, or perhaps to help as fast as possible to contain the epidemic as well as the pandemic. We need to be led by deep compassion, not only for the victims of the distressful situation, but also for the white collar criminals amassing superlative wealth over the misery and supreme suffering of other human beings. The gravity of the devastating pandemic was extremely high, even after the decrease in virulence reflected in the lives taken and the aftermath of a world that stopped, and with it everything that had been a reason to fight for. And look what he says here. The mass layoffs of workers of every kind following the slowly down of commercial activity will leave unimaginable moral, economic, and human consequences, certainly pushing more desperate individuals towards suicide, increasing panic, disorders, and the so called social addictions, alcoholism, smoking, drug use. Fear, this giant threat to the soul, will easily strike those prone to depression, while unusual crimes will rise among the starving masses in a society torn by suffering and uncertainties. And at this point, what I would like to do, this is the end of the chapter, by the way, but I would like to invite you to do one thing. Let us think about the bigger picture. Let us, when we have a cut, when we have a small cut in our on our finger, and I don't want you to suffer for this, a paper cut, right? What do we think first? Oh my God, I hurt my finger. Sometimes we may call names which we shouldn't. We should start praying for those cells right there in that area, and but we despair, right? We're really like now our minds are connected with that paper cut with our right there at the tip of our fingers. And we forget that tomorrow, especially those who works with computers, we have to type. And guess what? We may have a band-aid there. It's gonna hurt, right? Still, it's gonna hurt. It's going to impair our capability to from typing so many words to type fewer words. What am I saying here? There are always consequences that sometimes we cannot see. So for us to judge and say we need to do A, B, or C, here it is. Manuel Miranda bringing to us that there are different consequences, and it's not only the consequences of people who didn't like lost their jobs, but what are the moral consequences to this, right? Besides the economic, the in general, right? The how will it affect not only one person but a father, a mother, kids, right? Because they don't have the means to live. But how what are the consequences of those consequences, if I can say that way, right? The despair that will lead them into other um, unfortunate things, unfortunate ideals, right? Desperation. When that settles in, it really can bring a lot of destruction. So I want us to think, and at least to be kind enough to, instead of pointing fingers, and not only of, um, perhaps the few individuals that we may see that we know, but the great mass of even leaders, because they don't know. Unfortunately, they do not know, and we have to pray for them and to ask that spirituality also can guide them because they're also sons and daughters of God. So, to finalize what I would say, what I would add to this note that I'm bringing to this chapter here is that we would like to be thankful for the opportunity that we have to be guided, to be helped, right? But also to change ourselves and connect with these minds, connect with this uh, um, different ways that is being proposed to us by divinity for us to change and become a planet of regeneration, right? So, with no further ado, this is actually session one covering the introduction, chapter one and chapter two. Excuse me, introduction, chapter one and chapter two. And then for the next session, session two, we will be visiting adjusting to new lodgings and activities overview. At this point, I will take a sip of water and I will bring Kirsten here so we can have a discussion with all the questions and comments that perhaps we have received. You're mute.
Gosh, sorry. So no, I was saying, wow. I mean, what an impactful first few chapters. Like, we have the book here with us as well, and just, rereading some parts, and really was just thinking we probably could spend hours and hours just, discussing and commenting, but that we don't have, and respect the time and everyone else's time. So it's kind of like one of those moments where a mind is just sort of like blown. Even rereading it now because we've read it before, but rereading it and hearing you read the text again is just reaffirming how crazy things are, for lack of a better word, how crazy things can get, for a lack of a better way to put it. Um, but it's just, it's mind boggling, but really eye opening as well. So just kind of wanted to, before we get right into the comments, just wanted to share there were a lot of people that were excited about hearing about this topic today. Alba saying she's very excited to hear about the accounts of this book. Um, our dearest Yasko saying hello. We're so glad that she was able to join us. Um, and of course, this person just saying hello as well, Kirsten, whoever she is. Um, but we wanted to really kind of dive into some of the questions and comments that were posed amongst our own. And the first one was posed by Yasko, and she's actually quoting the book here when she says, "Egotistical abuses of power, indifference to others' suffering, and to duties towards society." End quote. Can we anticipate that the present worldwide COVID pandemic will help to turn around this state of our society? And if so, how?
Wow.
Yeah, thank you,
you
Oscar, for
know,
your
I,
question.
I,
But yeah.
I don't want to sound pessimistic, Yasko. I think it will be one of the elements that will help us, right? And we have to think in different, dive into different realities, if I may say. For us who are staying here, and talking about these things, and we did not lose a loved one, or we didn't get sick enough to, um, and I'm talking about, in relation to COVID-19, since you mentioned the pandemic, right? Um, and say that things are so hard, this and this and that, and right, but there are also the other people who went through some tough moments, who lost loved ones. There are many of us who actually are in that state of disbelief because of things didn't go the way we thought it would be, right? And perhaps when um, we were thinking that things were going well, guess what? We would lose a loved one, lose our jobs, and all those things. On the other hand, there's also the individuals that passed, that discarnated because of this pandemic, as a result as well of the way, the leaders of the emergency management, if we can say that way, did not do their jobs, or perhaps things were not approached the best way possible, as a consequence of mass discarnation, as we have seen here happen. What's happening to them on the other side? Some of them, perhaps they're in in a state of indignation, right? Some of them are like, I did my part, I did what I could. I'm happy that I'm, back in the spirit realm, and I will work to, better my life and better those who stayed behind. So I want you to think, and I want everybody to think about this, that it's not just, cutting dry, seeing things from one perspective. I think the reason I'm saying this is that I think that the collectiveness will allow us to look at later on our past and say, wow, we really dropped the ball, but we learned. We're not gonna fall again in the same on the same pit, right? So I think there is goodness to be analyzed and perceived, as well as If we maintain our minds in the state that they are right now of indignation, for many of us, and that is also a consequence, we're not going to learn anything. It's going to take more time for us to realize that enough is enough. For those individuals, perhaps regeneration will come much later than for some of us. So I hope that answers the question. But I don't want people to be optimistic and say, okay, yeah, 2023 will be different, right? Or 2022 rather, or 2023, whatever. If we're not making changes within ourselves, right? If we're not spreading the changes with others as well, the loved ones. So I think that would be my note on that. I hope that helps and brings some enlightenment on this three-dimensional view of things or consequences.
No, I think that was well said, Leo. I think remembering to take all sides into consideration. It's not one sided. It is definitely multidimensional. And then we actually have a comment from Paula. And I think it'd be nice if we could read the comment and then because she again is referring to oops, she's referring to a part in the text that's on page 20. Um, and I don't know if you could pull it up there on your end, but I sure can read it here. It's a paragraph on the bottom of page 20, and it talks about it was thought that the monster of war would be a solution to reduce the population of the earth, as had happened before, and thus scientific research labs, under the pretext of penetrating microbial life to better study and safeguard health, also established secret codes to create horrifying viruses, starting from the strain of some illnesses. As a dreadful consequence, epidemics have emerged in this century, some transformed into pandemics that continue to devour lives by the thousands. And so this is Paula's, I believe this is where her comment comes from. And she says, this lab statement supports the origin of COVID from a lab, as I have heard from credible sources and a retired federal government virologist. If so, biological warfare lab research needs curtailment. So that was just in reference to, yeah, but I think, Leo, if I may jump in and make a comment.
Please, yes, because you're
Um,
more entitled to answer this than I am.
oh,
Although I
no,
do have my,
no, I'm not.
you're in the field.
Um,
I'm not.
but on the bottom of page 20 of the book, they don't specify. I mean, that it's kind of the, I don't know if it's positive or negative, but I'm sure it's on purpose. They're not specific. They don't say specifically that COVID was created in a lab and then spread, but they do, infer um, that there have been viruses created within this century that have ultimately been caused devastation, right? I would say horrifying viruses. Um, because of the epidemics have emerged because of that. So, we don't uh, we don't want to say that spiritism or even this book is confirming that, but that it has happened. So, we're not here to get into a political argument, because ultimately these things turn political. But just here, just we're, as Leo's just here, just to share what's in the book and to share what
Right.
Manuel Filomena G. Miranda is sharing, and how we interpret that, is our own, I guess, our own business.
Well,
But yeah, go ahead, Leo.
this is a good point, Kirsten, that you bring. I would like to say the following. Reading the book, we can, without further verification, we can quickly jump into a conclusion and say, oh my gosh, this is what Spiritism is bringing. We have to be careful with that. What we do know is one thing. I think that all of us um, can can agree on the idea of action and reaction, right? If any act, there is going to be a reaction there, a pushback, if you will. Um, Recently, studying in the area of emergency management, we came across several studies in terms of illnesses, pathogens, and you name it. And one of the things that we learned as well is in medical school or dealing with pandemics and endemics, you name it, is a process called gain of function, right? And I'm saying this because we can go and learn from it. Don't just watch YouTube videos. There is a plethora of papers of very renowned studies and doctors that actually study the act of gain of function. What it is that you take a strain of a virus, right, and you make it way more stronger, or as if you were giving asteroids to it, right, and to see the consequence, and to perhaps to create vaccines that will actually stop that virus, or kill the virus, if you will, whatever you want to call it. So it's taking a small monster, making a huge monster to be able to create a vaccine that will actually create that huge monster that we created. Guess what? As there are consequences, action and reaction, when such a thing is done, not only the huge monster now that we created can fall into the wrong hands, but also it can be spilled, through an accident, right? Somebody in a laboratory can be infected, and guess what? Now that individual will be spreading. So yes, to your point, Paula, that should be contained, that should work on it, that should, and there are several agencies here in the U.S. and overseas as well that should be, they ought to be analyzing and creating parameters that will stop this from reaching the public, right? Now, how much can we contain? How much can we be sure that this is going to happen, that it's secured enough? We don't know. We're not there to control it, right? The truth of the matter is, here we have a pandemic that we're not here saying that it happened, but this is also being mentioned here that we have to be careful. To a degree, we should say enough is enough. We don't have to suffer to see the big monster, right? Or we don't have to suffer with the big monster. On the other side, I'm also for, to a certain degree, and I'm this is Leo, and I think many of us connect with this idea that science is there for us to reach new, points, new levels, but we really have to be careful. And this goes back to the point that I was saying earlier, right? When we have nowadays, beautiful machines, beautiful technology, but we're using to make others suffer, right? So this applies, this containment of technology intelligence ought to be. We need to slow down a little bit and go back to our cores and says, is this important? I'll give you a final example, and I would like to ask you to think about this as well. I know we have quite a bit, Kirsten. I'm sorry, but think of the technology in our homes right now, right? Everything that is listening to us, to connecting with us, right? The Internet of Things, right? The U.S. right now have a huge issue in our hands because we don't have enough legislation to say how can that information be used. And I know I'm opening a new can of worms here. How can that information used in the future against ourselves that are using that right now? We're still working on that. So I'd like to, again, ask us to reflect, study. Don't just jump into conclusions, as Kirsten said, that the Spiritism say that, but there are reactions to every action, but we're intelligent enough to go after and study together and come to a consensus, at least to respect ourselves. And I'll leave it at that.
No, I think that was great, Leo. But let's go ahead and jump, and maybe this might be our last, just because of time. But
Couple
Paula,
more maybe.
okay, okay. Paula also mentioned something else, and I think it's noteworthy to share. She again brings a quote, and it's from the end of chapter 2. She says, "Agree that fear is a quote great threat to the soul." Page 36, especially for those prone to depression. Tips on recognizing being in a fear state and antidotes.
Wow,
And I
that is a good point. Go ahead, Kirsten. You were going to say something.
Well, no, I was gonna just read part of the quote. If
Which
you
is page 36. Go ahead.
page, yeah,
You
page
have it in front of you.
36. Yeah. Let me read. Um, The massive layoffs of workers of every kind following the slowdown of commercial activity will lead unimaginable moral, economic, and human consequences, certainly pushing more desperate individuals towards suicide, increasing panic disorders, and the so-called social addictions, alcoholism, smoking, drug use. Fear, this giant threat to the soul, will easily strike those prone to depression, which unusual crimes will arise among the starving masses in a society torn by suffering and uncertainties.
Thank you for reading that. It is very true. I think this is one of the most important parts of this book, this chapter for sure. What I would say, in the little that I know that I understand in terms of depression, right? The the a way that I have to describe it and to point out is the following: I'm hungry, but I don't want to eat, or I am not hungry and I want to eat a lot. One of the two. And this doesn't really just go for food, for anything in our lives, right? So I have to go to work, but I don't want to go to work. And there are many reasons why we could feel that way for sure. That doesn't mean that it's depression, but when it's repetitive, or I just want to work, I don't want to do anything else. I just want to work because we find at work the a way for us to escape from our reality, right? So I'm giving these two examples for us to, before it becomes chronic, that we identify and say, oh, this is not normal, right? Or if somebody sometimes comes to us and say, you're doing this, especially those who does not like us, they tend to point out things that are negative on us, and that is good, that is not bad, obviously, to a certain extent. And then we need to obviously right away connect with ourselves, connect with our creator, whichever religion, whichever ideal you follow, that is bigger than ourselves, to find joy, not necessarily in religion, but to find joy in the creator and the creation as well. To look at ourselves as, my God, I am a universe. I think we were talking about this the other day, Kirsten, right? Identifying ourselves as a universe, right? With many parts, that has many planets, suns inside of us that we need to learn how to deal with it. It's amazing, right? Seek professional help. What are the things that we can do? And I just said something interesting here before the professional help, but expose yourself to the sun. This time of the year is so hard, right, for us to um, you know uh, have some sunshine, but find warmth, find the things that brings you joy, right? That will get you out of that position. And obviously, as we were saying, um, find seek a professional help as well. Um, the Latin, for example, culture, they have this idea that man is tough, man is really robust, right? We don't go through these things. No, we also need help. We need to cry. We need to feel our feelings. We need to share our feelings. All of these things, right? It's so I know it's hard, especially coming, when men have to deal with this. Recently, Kirsten and I were talking about how hard it is for somebody to express a feeling that they're feeling. They don't even know that that feeling exists. They, most of the time, if they're feeling upset, they call it anger, right? And then we also extend it in the understanding of others, for example, that English is a second language for these individuals, and they don't even know the word. How can they express themselves? So there's so much to be done, so much understanding to be shared. And I think that all of us we are needed. But when we have these small signs, yes, we will be able to identify it much earlier, and perhaps partake with these recommendations. But I would love to hear from others as well. Send us comments and on how they were helped and how they saw others being helped. It is by sharing that we can overcome a lot of these things too. So I don't know if you would have anything to add there, Kirsten.
Just a little something. No, that was great, Leo. I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the only other things I would share don't know if I could. Okay. One of the things I would share is that the only way to overcome fear truly is to face it. To face it and view it with compassion and curiosity and see what it has to teach us.
Very true.
You know, and not trying to run from it because, it's a very common reaction is that we run from fear, but it's impossible to run away from ourselves. So no matter where we run to, we carry it with us anyway. So
Mhm.
it's an oxymoron, I think, is the term I want to use. It maybe it's something another term I want to use, but really just facing our shadows, facing and knowing, being able to identify what fear feels like for us, because for everybody it's different. It looks different. It feels slightly different. And you might think like, oh well, no, fear is straight to the point. But we all experience that emotion that, in different ways, in different shapes and forms, and it manifests in different ways and shapes and forms in our lives. So it goes back to being self aware. But that's all else I wanted to share
Very
about
true.
that. Um, Leo, there was a question that I posed, and I'll throw it up on here.
Please.
Um, but there was a text, or a part in the text, I should say, where they kind of reference that Jesus, and other spiritual things have become an object of scorn and disdain. So what came to our mind is that, how do we counteract that? Whether as parents or utilizing um, social media or just any type of media in general. How do we counteract that? Should we be counteracting on a daily basis? Should it be something we're addressing on a monthly basis? I mean, because we know that this is constantly going on. That the image of Christ or Jesus, and just all things moral and good are being looked at as something like, oh well, that's for the older, outdated generation, like that, morals that no longer applies to us. We're free. We're just going to do whatever we want, no rules, no inhibitions. How do we counteract all of that?
Kirsten, there are so many things that comes to mind, my mind just like went rook, and I think are the mentors helping us, right? Um, it's sad to say the least, right? What's happening. Um, but there is a passage of the Bible where we're reminded to let the dead bury the dead, right? Um, I think this idea in itself will bury itself, because it's not sustainable, right?
Mm,
It's not that we're saying here that Jesus is the superhero. No, what Jesus did are, uplifting or encouraging or bringing a sense of responsibility to all of us. So it's not per se what Jesus, the figure of the man only on the cross. It is, because it also makes us reflect a lot about what we can do, on how compassionate we can be towards others. But it's also the sense that the example, how much goodness was brought by his teachings, right? By his examples. And it leads me to this idea of the example. And before I go into that, the more we talk about it, the more we give life to this, and I'll call it nefarious ideals, to bring the image, the examples of Jesus down, the more they will grow. It's much like, okay, you choose to discuss negative things, and we have to address negative things, otherwise they will continue. But we shouldn't do in a sense that we're there to fight, because number one, Jesus does not need us to fight for him, because the example speaks for itself, right? So I think that leads us in the sense of, you know what, let's just push this thing aside, and let's remind ourselves that the example is what's going to speak louder. And for that, I will finalize with the example of the book. You please help me, of Joanna de Cusa, when she is actually burned at stake, with her son. What's the name of the book? Sorry.
oh,
Anyways,
I
Yes,
don't remember.
I'm trying. This is one of reincarnations of Joanna de Angelis, that she gives herself um, to to Christ, in terms of, following Christ, and exemplifying or multiplying the examples of Christ in society during the Christ time, and she is burned at stake. And the man, right at her last minutes, asks her about, where was her Christ, right? And she turns, and I'm paraphrasing here, and she says, he's the one who taught me also how to die righteously, without,
Mm.
not only fearing but also hating those who were burning her, right? So this is a very exaggerated example, because I think that there are moments of our lives that we are pushed to such a limit that we feel that we are being burned, right? Not
Mhm.
necessarily physically, but we feel that, oh my gosh, that you're pushing me to my limits. You're really extracting the best of me. Good news, thank you, Yasko. She's put it right now by Alberto de Campo. Good news, thank you.
That's where the
I
book
knew she,
lived, so yeah.
I knew she would know, because she did a lot of study on the women as well. So thank you, Yasko. So it's important for us to look at these examples and act or counteract through true examples in our lives. Now, I'm saying this to myself, folks, because I'm not perfect yet. There are moments that I do feel that it's like enough is enough, and many of us who live closely to me, they know, I'm not perfect. But these are the things that we have to talk about it, the positive things. There will be a lot of crazy things going on out there, but especially with our children, they will not see it by us saying, "Oh, Jesus was a great man." This Look at this encounter when he brings the altitudes. They don't understand yet, right? Recently, I was invited graciously to the 15th birthday of my niece, and my brother asked me, "Oh, would you like to say something?" I ended up saying a lot, as usual. But one thing that it came to mind to say to her in this small speech that we brought to the gathering that we had was the Beatitudes, to remind her of the Beatitudes, right? Blessed are those, and so on and so forth. And when I was writing it, and when I was citing it, I was like, will this make a mark? Will this change anything? And this voice came to me and says, not now, but in the future. And I remember having a couple people coming to me and like, why did you do this? I'm like, I don't know. It just came to mind for me to do it. So hopefully, in the future, through her examples that she's going to face in life, she will connect to that moment. Or maybe one day she's going to watch that tape of her 15th birthday and say, wow, it makes sense now. So there you go. I believe that, hopefully that helps. And we can always dive into more later on, because I think this is a topic for a talk too, Kirsten. Thank you.
No, definitely. Leo, any last or final thoughts you want to share before we wrap up and have you do the prayer?
Read the book. Read the book. Please go online, as well as participating in this. But go online, watch the other videos as well. References Paula was doing here. Dive into it, folks, because it's beautiful. The moment that sometimes we're doing nothing, just grab the book and read two paragraphs, nothing more. If anything, just read the first five paragraphs, and I'm quite sure that you're going to be so amazed that you're going to be like, no, now I have to continue, right? So that's the only thing I would like to remember. Thank you so much for sticking with us, in help me kickstart this moment, and let's be blessed with all this message.
Absolutely. Leo, would you like to send us off with the end prayer?
Yes, we can do that. Thank you. With our hearts full of joy, happy that we are together again, connected in one mind and one heart, we ask you, dear Lord, that you guide us to give continuation to this work, not only to read and present, but to exercise these teachings in our lives, to also connect with one another as we present these teachings, and most importantly, to connect with the higher minds who are working to turn this moment of despair that we're living, the feeling of fear and discontentment, to a much better condition where we can see light, we can see enjoyment, we can see happiness, knowing that tomorrow will be much better based on the actions of today. Once more, we are grateful for having the opportunity to share, to educate ourselves and others. And may we utilize of the tools that we have, technology, health, even our difficulties, to make our lives better. This way, we ask that you shower with joy and happiness the house of each one of us who watched this talk tonight, those who are connected with us, and everyone around us. With your guidance, protection, and permission, we end this meeting, and so be it.